Hello, welcome to our RecapPlus channel with me, Matthew. Today we will watch a recap movie called Fist of Connor, released in 2023. This is a spoiler content video, so please turn on the subtitle and let's start the story. At the beginning of the movie, we witness Frank, a man, engaged in training with his wooden dummy. Soon, an individual approaches him, expressing a desire to test his fighting skills. It becomes evident that Frank is a formidable fighter, showcasing his prowess through a series of attacks, proving himself to be a formidable adversary. However, a turning point occurs when Frank's rival produces a mirror and directs its reflection at Frank's face. It is revealed that this sudden exposure to directed light is Frank's vulnerability, stemming from his childhood photophobia, making him sensitive to light in his eyes. Subsequently, Frank's rival seizes the opportunity to launch multiple attacks. Initially, it appears as though Frank has conceded, but he makes a remarkable comeback, opting to face his rival with his eyes closed. In the end, Frank emerges victorious in the fight, prompting the challenger to acknowledge him as the legendary figure spoken of by many. The challenger believes Frank to be the master of the Condor Fist, an ancient martial art dating back to the 16th century. Upon hearing this, Frank corrects the challenger, revealing that he is mistaken. The person he referred to as the legend is, in fact, Frank's identical twin brother. The scene shifts to Frank, now determined to train intensively to confront his twin brother, driven by a deep-seated grudge. One day, Frank embarks on a motorcycle journey to search for his twin brother. During a rest stop, he is suddenly ambushed by an assailant, but Frank easily subdues him. As Frank prepares to depart, the assailant brandishes a firearm, claiming only to seek Frank's ancient book. Frank clarifies that the book the man seeks is now in possession of his twin brother, containing the deadly martial art known as the Fist of the Condor from the 16th century. Unconvinced, the man insists that Frank turn his back, and Frank complies. In a flashback to several years earlier, we see Frank seeking his wife's permission to study martial arts under Chile's most renowned teacher. Frank promises to return and start a new life with his wife and child after mastering martial arts. Eventually, Frank and his twin brother, Marco, journey to a hill where they finally meet the esteemed teacher. Following Frank and Marco's declaration of their intention to study under the teacher, she made the surprising decision to accept only one of them. Although Frank acknowledged Marco's superior strength, the teacher saw something more in Frank, his passion and humility. Frank, upon hearing the teacher's decision, accepted it and prepared to return home. The scene then depicted Frank's relentless dedication to improving himself, with a year of rigorous training under the teacher's guidance. One day, during a strenuous training session with two other students, they noticed someone covertly observing their movements. To their astonishment, it was revealed that this observer was none other than Marco, Frank's twin brother. All this time, Marco had not returned home but had secretly pursued martial arts training. The teacher disclosed that Marco had been doing this since Frank arrived. A few days later, the teacher introduced a unique lesson on controlling the ego, an inner guest always present within us. By mastering their ego, the students could achieve balanced body control. She instructed one student to step into an empty container, an endeavor that defied physics. While the student struggled, the teacher effortlessly balanced herself atop the container, emphasizing the importance of self-belief and refraining from negative self-talk, as the body responds in kind. The next day, one student decided to leave, feeling unable to endure the demanding training regimen. Now, only two disciples remained. The teacher announced a new phase called the season without legs, forbidding the use of feet in daily life and practice for the next 6 months. The two students began binding their feet each morning, continuing their rigorous training without foot usage. After a month of intense effort, one of the students who had grown weaker decided to depart. Only one student remained, Frank. In the ensuing days, Frank persisted in his training, gradually adapting to life and practice without the use of his legs. One evening, Frank and the teacher shared a dinner together. During their meal, the teacher mentioned that if Frank successfully completed the season without legs, he would officially become her best student. At the same time, Frank was taken aback to spot Marco hiding in the bushes. It turned out that Marco was also undergoing a Legless training, mirroring Frank's efforts. Frank inquired why the teacher hadn't invited Marco to join them. The teacher admitted that Marco was physically tougher than Frank, but his jealousy and negative emotions were a hindrance. Frank reacted with silence, gazing at his teacher, seemingly skeptical of her words. Shortly thereafter, Frank successfully completed the arduous Legless training for 6 months. The teacher approached him, carrying an ancient book. She explained that she would bequeath the book to Frank, as she felt old and weak and believed she wouldn't be able to guard it as before. She entrusted Frank with the responsibility of protecting the book with his life, ensuring it didn't fall into the wrong hands. The book contained a guide to the legendary martial art called the Fist of the Condor, as well as guidance on nourishing the human body and soul. Unbeknownst to Frank, Marco had been eavesdropping on their conversation from outside the window. The scene shifted back to the present, with Frank actively searching for Marco. Frank entered a bar to buy a drink, politely requesting a bottle of water from the bartender. However, the thugs at the bar took offense to Frank's presence. One of them confronted Frank and promptly ejected him, citing his unpleasant body odor. As Frank was leaving, the thug decided to pour water on Frank's head, insisting that he needed a shower. Frank attempted to keep his composure but, unexpectedly, re-entered the bar, this time ordering a glass of beer. This move angered the thugs and one of them confronted Frank, demanding that he leave the bar while crawling like an animal. In response, Frank poured his drink on the thug's head, leading to a confrontation. Frank, displaying remarkable martial prowess, incapacitated all the thugs. As he was about to exit the bar, a man named Calorie directed a mirror at Frank's face. Knowing Frank's photophobia, he exploited this vulnerability. As they were on the brink of battle, Calorie proposed a duel to the death with Frank, scheduled for Friday at 5 a.m. in an abandoned building. Frank agreed, suspecting that Calorie was actually Marco. The scene transitions to a flashback from 2 years ago. Frank's teacher was imparting knowledge from the ancient scriptures that would eventually be passed down to Frank. Frank underwent continuous training under the teacher's guidance. However, one day, the teacher fell ill and was suddenly attacked by Marco, leading to her tragic demise. Shortly after, Frank arrived, and a fierce battle ensued between Frank and Marco. Ultimately, Marco overpowered Frank, and Frank was on the brink of death. Marco's motive was to acquire the ancient book. After Marco departed, Frank was rescued by an old man, one of the teacher's friends who owned a martial arts school. Frank recuperated in a relatively short period and learned martial arts from the old man over several months. The old man, named Wolk, acknowledged Frank's tremendous progress and suggested that Frank either leave or establish his own hermitage. However, Frank's primary objective was now to track down Marco, his twin brother, especially after learning that Marco had killed Frank's wife and child. Returning to the present, Calorie approached Marco to inform him about the upcoming duel with Frank. Calorie questioned Marco about Frank's mastery of the martial arts from the ancient books, emphasizing that if Frank had indeed mastered them, Calorie was likely to lose the duel. Marco explained that he had taken the ancient book before Frank had completed it. Marco promised to teach Calorie the contents of the ancient book if he managed to defeat Frank. Excited about the duel, Calorie eagerly accepted the challenge. Meanwhile, Frank was seen training on the beach to prepare for his impending showdown with Calorie. The following day, Wolk was training one of his students when Calorie approached him. Calorie revealed that he was Marco's student and declared his intention to finish off Frank. A battle ensued between Calorie and the elderly Wolk, with Calorie emerging victorious. Before killing Wolk, he allowed Wolk to convey a message to Frank. However, Calorie refused to listen to the message and declined to deliver it to Frank. After defeating Wolk, Calorie returns to Marco, informing him of his success and preparing to leave for the duel with Frank. Before departing, Marco instructed Calorie to infiltrate Frank's mind to gain an advantage in the impending duel. On the other hand, Frank was seen packing his belongings and setting out on his motorcycle. Soon, Frank and Calorie finally crossed paths, ready to engage in their anticipated battle. They warmed up before commencing the duel. Amid their battle, it became evident that Frank was overpowered by Calorie. As Calorie prepared to finish Frank off, he suddenly revealed a flashlight on his body, exploiting Frank's weakness. However, Frank had become accustomed to fighting with his eyes closed, rendering it no longer a hindrance. Calorie handed Frank Wilkes' name tag and explained that before he had killed Wilkes, Wilkes had wished to convey some messages to Frank. However, Calorie had chosen not to listen to those messages and instead ended Wilkes' life. Calorie also revealed the gruesome truth about how Marco had mercilessly killed Frank's wife and child. To make matters worse, Frank's family believed that Frank himself was responsible for their deaths, as they were unaware of his twin brother's existence. Hearing Calorie's revelations, Frank's mental state suddenly weakened, causing him to collapse. However, in a surprising turn of events, Frank emerged victorious in the duel. With newfound determination, Frank hurriedly set off to confront Marco. To watch more video like this, click on the videos on your screen, and don't forget to let me know how you feel about today's video in the comments down below. And at last I will say stay safe and stay healthy. See you next videos.